Ian?
Thank you very much. Hello there, people. This is my talk on from an IVI in a box to a car in a box. This goes on into a bit of detail of a disclosure I found and did on a car I previously owned. So let's begin. Oh no, wrong window. First things first, who am I? You could probably say I'm the ultimate car hacker. I built this kit car 15 years ago now. This lockdown, I'd really like to go out and for a spin in it, but I can't because it's not actually at my house, it's somewhere else. But it's built from a load of different Ford components. It has 3 ECUs, of which 2 of them I built it myself. One of them is the Mega Squirt ECU that controls the spark and the injection. The other one is the little device in the top right hand corner there that is a data logger that actually uses CAN to get messages from the Mega Squirt ECU and logs that to an SD card so I can know how my car is actually going. Down the bottom there is actually a little disclaimer. The work I carried out in my own time on my own vehicle, nothing to do with any current or previous employer. Another part to that is if you brick your own car, please do not blame me. It's quite easily done. I've done it myself. A few years ago now, I plugged in one of my own built CAN adapters into my Jag at the time, turned it on the ignition, it lit up like a Christmas tree, and then came up with a message, can't find gearbox, at which point I went, oops, that's not a good idea. So I turned it off, unplugged the cable, turned it back on, still can't find gearbox. At that point, I'm thinking, oh no, I think I've broke it, and the dealer doesn't like me the best of time, so I'd better try and fix it. So I went and got my tools, disconnected the battery, plugged it back in, still can't find gearbox. At this point, I'm really panicking. Late in the evening, and I'm like, oh no, I don't know what to do. So I'll go for the longer version of disconnect the battery, leave it off for 20 minutes and see what happens. Luckily, after those 20 minutes, plugged it back in, got in the vehicle, turned it on, no error messages, no lights, no nothing. Sweet, everything's okay. By this time, it's about 11 o'clock at night, so I decided not to do any more on it at the time. Next morning, I went for a drive, pulled off the driveway, put my foot down, it accelerated, it kept accelerating. It had forgotten how to change gear. It took 3.5 weeks to learn how to change gear again. And me, like an idiot, 6 weeks later, did exactly the same thing again and caused exactly the same error message. Everyone always tells me I should have actually recorded it. I'd forgotten that I'd previously done it with the same bit of hardware. But onto the meat of the talk itself. So my car hacking background, 2018 or 2017, I found the issue with my car. I then presented at DC 4420, B-Side London Rookie Track, and DEF CON 26 in the car hacking village. Web browsing from a car, what's the worst that can happen? We'll go into that in a second. In 2018 and 2019, I was also part of the team of car hackers that were invited to the Bug Bash events in the US on real vehicles to hack to see what we could find. DEF CON 27, I was part of a bug crowd car hacking panel with both Cybergibbons and Spectres. Also last year I was at Auto Isaac in America for a car hacking vulnerability disclosure process panel, and now for my sins run the Car Hacking Village UK, of which I did 6 B-Sides events last year, Hacking the Box Amsterdam, SteelCon Interpol event, 44Con training and Black Hat EU. This year I've done B-Side Leeds. There's a couple there that have been now cancelled. There's a couple planned later on in the year. But I now take my car in the box to these events for people to have a play with, because it's slightly safer if they break my car in the box than they do it on the road and possibly kill someone. I have actually been asked to take my car in the box to Brazil, Australia, India, Philippines, Singapore, DEF CON, amongst others. Logistically, I'd like to, but it's a bit of a pain. So not really going to unless I can get it there in the back of the car. So onto the disclosure itself. In July 2015, I purchased this vehicle here. It's a Citroen DS5. It's the top of the range, 1955 limited edition. It had all the toys, all the bells and whistles, including an 8-inch touchscreen, I think, in that you could surf the internet on the head unit via tethering to your phone over Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth. Great idea, wonderful. Why you'd want to do it though, I don't know, because the UI was absolutely rubbish. However, when you did tether to the phone itself, if you used Nmap and scan the other way, you found 23.111.3333 and port 20,000 open. As my day-to-day job as a network engineer, decided to telnet to it, see what I could find. On telnetting to device, there was no authentication at all. Straight into the file system, and then had a look around. Found some SQLite databases, which you could then extricate off the device, either via the USB port itself or by mapping a path over FTP. So you could, within those SQLite databases itself, there was your GPS history, your telephone book, and your phone history. Wonderful, GDPR out. In 2017, I decided to purchased my new vehicle, my Jag itself. So I then disclosed this information to the manufacturers. Peugeot Citroën, being French, didn't quite get it. Their view on the matter was it's up to the users to secure their own Wi-Fi. That being, I'm not saying the Wi-Fi is not secure. I'm saying that you really shouldn't have Telnet enabled on your IP stack. So I gave them a little scenario. Your phone's run out of battery. You want to go to the cinema. So what do? You pull into McDonald's, park up in the car park. You tether through McDonald's Wi-Fi. You then have a look on the internet, see what's on the cinema. And while you're doing that, some scroll in the car park running Nmap. They then have access to your head unit. They now know where you live because everyone logs their home and work details. They know where you've been, where you're going, and your entire phone book. So they can basically go and rob you. And they were like, ooh, that's not really a good idea. The other side of this coin is the French. I did actually ask them if it was a matter of French national security, because the French president gets driven around in one of these or a derivative of it. So it's probably not against the will of man that some of the, shall we say, intelligence services could possibly break through this Wi-Fi, etc., and find out where the president had been. They really didn't find that that much of an issue. Their general fix was basically disable the Wi-Fi. Great, wonderful. I'll later come on to that. So at the time I decided, I think there's more to it than just the telnet port. I was told that TCP 20,000 was direct access to CAN using DMP3, which is an ICS system. So I decided to buy a head unit from a similar spec car. Head unit I bought itself was from a DS3, which is the smaller brother to the DS5. When I purchased it at a scrapyard, chap behind the counter, I had to ask for the plugs, and he was like, well, surely the plugs are on the vehicle you bought, it's going in. So I sort of explained that it's going in my kit car. Can I just have the plugs? And he was like, yes. However, you have no warranty. Thank you very much. So it's a considerable sum on the head unit to then take it home and then try and plug it in. You plug in 12 volts and ground, nothing happens because you need the rest of the vehicle. As you can see there, the car on the floor requires you to have the body control module, wiring loom, steering wheel switches, ignition column, switch, ignition barrel, instrument cluster you don't really need, but it's quite handy to see what you're doing. And there's some other switches, and you also need a power supply. However, that's not very convenient if you're trying to take it around conferences to show this is the vulnerability you found. So I decided to do a bit of CAN sniffing. Within that CAN sniffing, I found 5 messages that are required to tell the head unit to turn on. I then created a head unit in a box, which is this one here. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner at the bottom, there is a blue box that has an Arduino Nano in. That basically spews the 5 messages on the CAN bus required to basically tell the thing to turn on. On the top of the head unit itself, there is a little Wi-Fi logo. However, this one has had its Wi-Fi disabled in software, which is a bit of a pain because I can't really show the hack that I found because I found it over Wi-Fi. However, the Bluetooth personal area network hack still actually is possible. So you can still tether via Bluetooth to this head unit and then telnet into it and explore the file system. I need to get hold of a car with the head unit with Wi-Fi working, so I can basically copy the files off and test it. I did copy the files on for my from my DS5. However, all that did was end up turning the screen upside down, which is not a good idea. After this happened, I sort of parked it for a bit. I did the bug bash event with Bugcrowd and a manufacturer I cannot name, where I found a major vulnerability that had a 5-figure payout between the 3 of us. That then gave me a bit of spare money to then continue with my car in the box, car on the bench. Here is my inspiration. You've all probably seen it before at DEF CON or other conferences. Grimm's 3PO. I would like to have my car in the box in the same location as 3PO sometime in the future. Working on that one, I think. So here is Grimm's 3PO. It's all the components from a Focus 2015, I believe. However, it doesn't. Which one?
2012 Ford Focus.
Okay, 2012. Mine's a 2015 Peugeot 208, but thanks me. So as I had a large selection of the parts already, I decided to go for the car in a box, or in this case, car in the floor. So I then had to purchase steering rack ECU, main fuse box, throttle body, engine ECU, ABS ECU, pedal, all those other components there. That laptop there is a steam-powered thing from the early noughties, I believe, which runs the Peugeot diagnostics thing that you need to actually enable some of the functions. However, that version of software isn't new enough to actually allow you to turn on some of the really advanced features like park assist, because in theory this has a electronic steering rack which will allow you to do the self-parking function. It does, when you turn the ignition on, allow you to actually get some purchase and actually turn the steering rack, but it won't actually steer itself. Still got to do some fuzzing on that one because it might be a case of getting it working. To create a car in a box, what's the first thing you have to do? You have to work out the wiring. Here is the wiring diagram for my kit car's main ECU, the Mega Squirt 2. It has a DB37 plug, of which 26 cables are connected, I believe. 6 of those are ground. So there's about 20 cables. It's a 4-cylinder running wasted spark and batch injection with one O2 sensor, a couple of temperature sensors, crank position sensor, throttle position sensor, and a couple of fuel pumps. Not very complicated. My car in the box is based on a Peugeot 208 1-litre 3-cylinder thing, which runs sequential injection, coil and plug, dual O2 sensor, dual variable valve timing with dual clamp sensors, air water temperature sensor, manifold air pressure sensor, electronic throttle body, and electronic pedal. If you look closely in the middle there should be 3 connectors for the main ECU. 2 of those are 53 pins, the other one is 32 pins. So potentially there's 138 pins available to actually connect it to just make the ECU work itself. Wiring diagrams on a PSA device is an absolute pain. You can get access to them through a paywall through Peugeot's website, but however, they're not actually, you don't actually ever get a wiring diagram for the whole vehicle. You get a functional base wiring diagram. This is the one for the engine ECU. You get a different one for the lights. You get another one for the side lights. You get another one for the indicators. If you ever try and do this, just try and download as much as you can, print them to PDF and save them for later, because there will always be a case of coming back later to actually try and work out what it's what's plugged into what. So The next bit of fun is how do we make the car think it's a car? First ECU to play with is the engine. So the engine relies on a couple of signals to actually think it's rotating. There's a crank sensor and the cam sensor. The crank sensor on most sort of petrol engines is either off the back of the flywheel using a 36-in-1 sensor or a 60-in-1 sensor like the Peugeot shown here. This picture here is actually the picture of the top of the engine. On the end of the two camshafts is where the sensor points to, and those sensors can tell exactly where in the rotation path the actual cams are to adjust that to give it the variable valve timing. There are two cam sensors. There's a single crank sensor. So onto the signals themselves. This here shows the signals from an ArduStim bit of software that runs with an Arduino. D0 is the crank signal, of which you can see the 60-1. So you've got 59 very close together waves, gap in the middle, and then another 59. And you notice there's 2 rotations of the crank for every 1 rotation of cam. D1 is the inlet cam, D2 is the exhaust cam, and they are sort of out of phase with each other because they're always, one opens up later than the other. The little board in the bottom right hand corner is a PCB I had made up that allows you to use either surface mount or through hole components to drive the ECU from the Arduino Nano itself. These are available if you just message me. I will send you one in the post at the cost of postage. I've got loads of them. You can also see in the top right hand corner of that PCB there's a really big footprint for a slightly bigger transistor, which can be used for driving slightly heavier devices like a motor for PWM, but I'll get to that in a second. So the next one was next sensor to simulate was the lambda sensors. The vehicle in question had 2 lambda sensors, one pre, one post cat. The lambda sensor itself would normally detect a AC wave on a DC offset. The DC offset's about 0.5 volt, and then you've got a small AC wave that says lean rich, lean rich. You need 2 of these. You can make them with a very, very basic 555 timer circuit like shown here. This one actually does work, and it's exactly the circuit that I have 2 of on my car in the box. The other thing with a lambda sensor is you need to fool the heater circuits into thinking they're working, which involves a couple of very large high wattage resistors, which are strapped across 12 volts to the pins on the ECU to make it think that it's drawing about 1.5 amps all the time. These get very hot, and when I ever do this presentation in person, I always say, please don't touch them. And by the end of the day, someone's gone around their back and touched it and gone, ow, that's very hot. Not a clever idea. That's why I warn you not to touch it, but you're stupid enough to touch it. Good luck. The hardest one of the sensors to actually simulate itself was the ABS wheel speed sensor. This little box of tricks here, again, has an Arduino Nano and a CAN controller in it. There's a little ArduStim board there with a slightly bigger footprint transistor and a display. The number on the top is the current required speed that you want. Number on the bottom is the speed that it's reading from the CAN bus off the vehicle itself. And there is a potentiometer on the right, which allows you to adjust the speed from 0 mile an hour to I think it goes up to 148 on the Peugeot. Basically, what you see in that plastic tub in the middle there is a big motor that uses pulse width modulation to make it slower or faster, and 4 wheel speed sensors. The actual car only needs 2, but that gives me a bit of redundancy in that if the spacing is not exactly correct, it will keep going for the portion of the day for how long I normally have to have it running for. When I first did it, it only had 2, and if one of those went wrong, the only way to get it back was normally to get the steam-powered laptop out and reset the ECU itself, which takes a while and is a pain. There are 2 other devices to full sensors on the car in the box itself. There is a potentiometer for the fuel gauge and also a potentiometer for the air temperature. Those then adjust dials on the instrument cluster itself. So the car itself has 4 CAN networks. There is the red and orange one on the left-hand side, which goes from your normal OBD2 port in the bottom left-hand corner, which has CAN on 614 and power, which goes through the body control module, your main fuse box, ABS, ESP, ECU, power, steering, and engine ECU. That's a high-speed CAN bus. There's 2 low-speed CAN buses. There's the yellow and green one, which is your steering control ECU, which is the switches that control your indicators, lights, windscreen wipers, stereo, etc. Potentially there could be the airbag ECU, but they're not actually that cheap to get hold of. I really didn't want to put an airbag ECU into a device that people were going to test against, because if they broke it, it'd be me that would have to actually fill in a form to say, oops, someone's broke it, and set an airbag off. So I decided not to actually put the airbag ECU in, or an airbag. There is also an additional OBD2 port attached to that said bus. That is a low-speed bus. There's power attached to that as well, so if you want, you can plug in a device, see what's going on that bus. There is a second low-speed bus with the instrument cluster, the matrix inside the instrument cluster, which is normally where it shows up your GPS navigation hints and things. And there's the head unit, and again another additional OBD2 header. There is actually a 4th CAN bus between the screen and the IVI. That is only really used for the touchscreen to tell the head unit exactly where someone's pressing on the screen. I have broken it out to a couple of pin headers, but no one has ever actually had a go at playing with it, seeing what's going on. So here is the box in its folded away form. The big box at the bottom is the main part. You've got the middle box at the top, which is it's actually a 12-inch record box, but that's the one that's got the ABS simulator in. The one on the right is the IVI in a box. There is another box of other alternative components, which cables and things, but don't actually need that to actually get the thing working. Here it is in the boot of my car. My new car currently is slightly bigger than my old Jag, in that previously the only thing that would fit in the boot of the Jag, or trunk in your case, is the car in the box. Now I can actually put the car in the box and the other boxes in there as well. Now we have a picture of the ABS simulator on the left, the head unit box on the right, and finally we have the picture of the 2 parts of the car in the box. On the left-hand side is mainly engine parts and steering rack, and the ABS ECU, etc. There is also a board at the top that shows the status of the lights. You can then, on the right-hand side, play with the switches on the steering column, which controls the lights, lights, washers, stereo, etc. On the right-hand side, just next to where those 2 black lines are, there is also a washer bottle. The original plan for that was actually to put a whiskey bottle attached to it. And if anyone was actually fuzzing the CAN bus and didn't use the button on the end of the stalk to actually get some whiskey out of it, you've got to drink what you actually got out of it. Problem with that is cars and alcohol was sort of frowned upon, and every time you did it, it did about half a litre. I know that people like Scotch, but that's not really cheap for me every time someone does it and gets half a litre of Scotch out of it. The actual vehicle itself, the actual car in the box itself, probably cost me about £2,000 to build. I could have probably done it a bit cheaper by actually buying a car and then selling off the bits that I didn't actually use. However, I then had to get rid of all the other bits, and it's just a pain in the bum trying to generally do that. With eBay always siding on the seller, on the buyer, not the seller. As you can see, on the left-hand side here is where you adjust the engine via the RG stim. here is the indicators for the coil and the injectors. You've got the O2 simulator there, which if you look at it when it's working, it sort of flashes on and off with the actual simulator itself. You've got a throttle body which does actually work with the pedal when it's plugged in. If you leave it plugged in too long, it will actually burn the motor out, so I normally disable it. You've got the steering rack along the bottom. Again, that does actually energize, and you can twist that quite easily and make the steering go lock to lock. It's slightly easier when you've actually got some rotational force on it, but it works. It's a functioning car. And then down the bottom here, you've got all your other buttons and things like disable ABS, hazards, lights, key, etc. The key actually does also have the radio RF key with it, so you can actually do hacking on this with RF if you would want to. I've not actually tried it myself because I've never really done it, and no one's actually had a go at it because no one ever brings the stuff with them to a conference. But let me come back to this other slide. Next slide. Here is a video, if it works, of the left-hand side. That's me adjusting the potentiometer on the RG stim, making the rev counter go up and down. Now the revs are about 2,000 revs. And now I adjust the potentiometer on the ABS simulator. And as you can see, it's now doing 80, 100, 143 mile an hour. If you've ever actually driven a Peugeot 208, it's like a Fiesta sized car. If you were doing 148 mile an hour in that, good luck. It would rattle itself to bits. Not a good idea. Another thing I do as part of the car hacking village is I built the nano CAN adapter. This PCB here will allow you to build your own CAN adapter for less than $5 with a $2 Arduino Nano and a $1.50-ish CAN controller board. This will allow you to get into car hacking for less than the price of the very expensive, less than the price of the average coffee. By default, the sketch that comes on it will allow you to just listen to the bus. It doesn't actually do anything back in the other direction. You can program it the other way if you want to, but it's just there to get someone involved rather than having to spend a large amount of money on a commercial, shall we say, CAN adapter. So this is the way to get people involved. Other car hacking villages around the world have also used the same adapter or same PCB to get people involved. It's quite good. I don't have any problem with people using it. If anyone wants one, again, contact me. I will send them out. I've also developed another little CAN adapter itself. It's the Tiny CAN adapter based on the AT Tiny 1614. Basically, it's cheaper than the AT Tiny 85, but it does actually have proper SPI and serial on it. That there probably costs less than $4 or $5, and it's not much bigger than the actual CAN OBD2 port itself. This one here can be used for, shall we say, surreptitious means. You can plug this in, it's powered off the bus itself through the power ports, and it will then squirt messages in depending on what message you actually receive in, as long as you've programmed it with that. There is another version which has a USB to serial adapter attached to it, which will work with SLCAN and socket CAN within a Linux environment, which actually works quite well. Again, pretty cheap to actually build. I've not published these on GitHub yet, but I will at some point. But these are more for playing around myself. Here is a video of my car in a box, and this is what I call disco mode, which is basically on the same bus as the steering control on the car in a box, and it basically forges the messages that would normally come out of the steering switch control very, very quickly. So you can then spoof it to make those messages happen. When I originally did this, I actually made it flash the main beams as well, which is great. You can hear the relay clicking until it actually fused the relay completely shut, which is like, oops, not a great idea. So I had to replace the relay, change the code slightly, and it still works, but it's not a good idea to actually flick a relay really, really fast, because it actually shuts itself up and breaks itself. Finally, I'd like to thank my missus for putting up with me while I was building this, and for the last year when I've been taking it around to different conferences. I'd like to thank the GRIMM team, Bryson, Brian, Matt, Bitbane, etc., for the assistance in when I was actually building the car in the box, and for the ongoing support with retweets, etc. And I'd also like to thank the Car Hacking Village team for sort of taking me in and letting me be part of the Car Hacking Village event, both in Vegas and also here in UK and Europe. Hopefully we'll take it forward further later on in the year. I was actually going to try and get the car in a box as part of the virtual car hacking village today, but I didn't manage to get all the hardware together in time to do it, but hopefully it will be sorted for the future. Bryson, is there any questions?
Yes, you kind of answered one question when you mentioned that the PD0 cost was an estimated $2,000. But could you talk a little bit more about how to estimate the cost of building a car in the box?
That was depends what car you want, basically. You've got the cost of the actual vehicle itself. The way I built mine was I actually built it from components that were bought from eBay. So instead of actually going out and buying a whole car and stripping it to pieces and putting it back together again, I actually built all the bits off of eBay, which is sometimes fun because they don't always come in the greatest condition. The actual car is quite a small car, so it doesn't have as many ECUs as you would think something like a BMW would have. Some of the bigger vehicles would have a separate ECU in each individual rear light cluster, whereas this, most of the functions of the lights and doors and etc. was in the body control module. The cost of power supply is for about $100. The cost of the wood and the frame and stuff is probably a couple of $100. But the actual cost of the parts itself was probably somewhere near $1,700-ish. There is a bit of work with the plugs and things for some of the ECUs, in that they are available commercially. However, the problem with that is each individual plug will cost you about $20 to $30. You then also need to buy the 3 different types of pins that go into it, and then you also need to buy the right pin crimping tool and the right plastic cover, etc., etc., and strain release and things. You can do it with a decent pair of pliers, but it's not advisable. And yeah, so if you're going to try and do it, reach out and get in contact, and I will help as much as I can. I have been actually asked by a couple of people to help them build equivalent things with them. I will help with the PCBs, etc., for the ArduStim and the ABS simulator. However, I don't think my missus would like me if I had to, if I built another one in my house, because I think she'd kill me. I've not been married long, and I'd like it to keep going. I don't really want to have to move into the garage just yet. So yeah, it's been a fun thing to do. It does take time, and it does get a bit tedious when you have to shorten down a massive bit of wiring loom that has 60 wires in it, and you're not too sure what you're doing. But my actual degree is in electrical engineering, so I should be able to wire up a car. I've previously rewired my brother's car once when he changed from a petrol to a diesel. and we cut the wiring loom underneath the rear seat, and the only two wires I got wrong were both black wires. One was the reverse switch and the other one was the rear windscreen wiper, which was great. When you put it in reverse, the rear windscreen wiper come on. When you press the rear windscreen wiper switch, the reverse lights come on. Wonderful set of traffic lights when you want someone to get off your rear. But yeah, any more questions?
So I'm just going to jump in on that. With Grim, we've built multiple car in the boxes, from pretty simple ones to very complex ones. And just adding a little bit more flavor to what Ian said there, there is a distinct difference in the amount of experience and effort that it's going to take if you buy parts that you assemble together into a car versus buying, say, a salvage car and trying to take all the parts on that. There are a lot of gotchas on the research side of that, and that's something where having access to an Ian, anybody on the Grimm team, anybody at Car Hacking Village, any other experts who have done this before, will save you a lot of time. And we got time for one more question here, and I'm going to bring this up because this is something that we had a little bit of a discussion about last year when we were together at the pub in London. And what do you think about the very expensive pasta, which is the car in the box that Toyota published last year, versus car in the box in terms of functionality?
The car in the box pasta, I actually did see it when I was at a Interpol event last year. It's basically for Renesys based ECUs, which are 4 generations out of date, I think, because I actually went and had a meeting with Renesys to build them a car in the box. And at the time I was about to start a new job, so I couldn't actually do it for them. I didn't really want to do it at home. But the Renesys CPU itself is not the latest one that they use. They have published schematics for it, but there is no code in there that actually does anything legitimate in any way, shape or form. But $28,500 for a box with four very cheap Renesys ECUs in it isn't really a good investment. And as Charlie Miller says, you could buy a whole car for that. The other thing that really gets on my nerves is when Charlie Miller every 6 months comes out and goes, oh, there's nothing happening in the car hacking world. It's like there is, but there's NDAs in front of it and we can't tell you. Because the vulnerability I found in the vehicle I cannot mention, you could probably do remote control on as well. So yeah, that I'm not allowed even to test because the OEM in question has basically said, we've paid you out, there is now an NDA, so you're not allowed to do anything more, which is great. But I wouldn't go anywhere near the pasta thing. From what I understand, they have sold a few, but they're more to OEMs to have a play around with than anything.
Yeah,
it's
I
a
would
great
concur
idea,
with that.
but I am trying to build something similar around some microcontroller based things by basically reverse engineering their CAN messages that go in between them and putting some screens up against the back. But at the moment I'm having issues trying to find an MCU that's quick enough to spew out 800 messages a second and be able to do something other than just spew messages all the time. I'd originally started with a Atmega 2560 and that doesn't get anywhere near it. I'm currently playing with a Teensy 3.2, which should be quick enough and is working with the messages, but I've now got to generate the right inputs and outputs, and I'm waiting on some stuff. I'm waiting on some stuff from China to arrive to be able to actually start doing that part of it. I plan on having the similar sort of displays that they have where you've got a serial based screen that shows the rev counter, the speedo, etc. But from what I've seen of it, yes, you can do some CAN hacking, but you could do that in my car in the box, and it's probably slightly more realistic on my car in the box than it is on the Toyota Pasta thing, because the Toyota Pasta thing, they give you all the CAN messages and say, oh, look, this message does this, and it's only the one thing that it does. Whereas in my car in the box, there's one message that does the rev counter and the speed and some other warning messages. And as anyone knows, people don't publish the DVC files. You have to find it out yourself by reverse engineering it or fuzzing the crap out of it.
Okay, Ian, I'm gonna have to cut you off.
Yeah,
So
no,
if anybody has any more questions, Ian will be in the expert track on the Discord channel. And
indeed.
next up will be Alyssa Miller.